infrastructure, the software, or a consultant, like Tech D. So the ability to really span, multiple clouds was an important aspect of the previous slide. So providing real-time analytics and insight and deploying it regardless of where it resides, where the software resides, is really important. And one of those, as you saw, was Cloud Pak for Data, DataStage for Cloud Pak for Data. And DataStage for Cloud Pak for Data is really intended to, again, deploy on multiple clouds, leveraging a microservices architecture. So this helps you really create and maintain like a data hub for sharing resources, sharing different workloads. It's designed for speed, really no additional cost from implementation. And again, to really like optimize a data hub architecture. Let's bring everything in. Let's make sure we understand the data, and then let's leverage it accordingly. Um, Gabe, you could probably talk a little better to this slide than I can, but really one of the capabilities is around like the developer productivity, right? Really allows you to see and build a flow. Um, Gabe, I don't know. Again, I know you've worked with the tool more
Yeah,
than I have. Is there anything that you'd want to call out as it relates to productivity or like the flow canvas?
sure. Yeah. And it's a smaller group here, so we could even, if time permits, let me know. We can show things inside DataStage. But the idea is the canvas is meant to be in Cloud Pak for Data. The UIs are the same, so you have a consistent UI no matter what the service. But for DataStage specifically, you have uh, tools that allow you to start up quickly, like you can create job templates. So you can reuse those templates. Other developers can use them and have a consistent design, look, and feel. You can do things like there are connectors that are asset browsers. So you can do things like define within a project a connection to something like an S3 bucket that you might be using elsewhere. You might be using that within a separate data quality tool or ingesting metadata that you're using for governance, and then decide you want to also do something like use that as a source for an ETL style flow. And you have things like asset browsers that where you can say, okay, look, the connection is already defined. Just grab that same connection within the same project and go. In that it allows you to do that. You have lots of capabilities for things that can be reused or smart connections, things like REST stages that allow you to flexibly do a variety of things that you would do with REST APIs, and others as well, right? So that all of those lead to a much faster design, a code-free design, but the flexibility and the complexity to now go in and make customizations or to do advanced things that you need to do in some cases. I don't know
Yeah,
if that
thanks, Gabe.
helps, Brian, but yeah.
Yeah, no, certainly does. Appreciate the insight there. And I think you touched on too, right? So the ability to quickly see and point to maybe different connectors to really see the entire flow. Here's just a quick snapshot of some of the data stage connectors that are available out of the box. There's a variety of them out there, and really depending on the use case is how you would do that, or depending on your environment. But you'll see too, I think some of the latest and greatest, right? So native support for Iceberg and Delta, we've seen that more and more common going up here. But like the S3 bucket, obviously is critical. So we still have a bunch of different assets that you're able to connect to, and there's more that are continuously being developed. Here's some of the transformation and quality stages. So again, just a bunch of out of the box capabilities from a data quality standpoint to really quickly and easily, work with the environment that you're currently leveraging today. Now, another deployment option is, SaaS. And SaaS, as we said, is really two different flavors. One is your traditional, fully managed environment on IBM Cloud, or there's also where you're able to really go anywhere, which is a newer model that I'll ask Gabe to talk to here in a second. But really, the as a service and anywhere is really to meet clients where they're going. You know, newer workloads are always evolving, and so the technology needs to keep up with that. This anywhere as a service really helps us align with where the market is going. Um, so really, I really just touched on this, right? As it relates to DataStage as a service or DataStage anywhere, there's really kind of a couple different ways to consume the technology. You can deploy the run engine in multiple different locations. And Gabe, maybe if you don't mind talking a little bit about that, like kind of the run engine and what that means for organizations being able to take that to different locations.
Sure. So you've got the concept within either the managed service or now the software-based or the cloud back for data on-premise version. You can separate what they call a data plane. So in terms of data stage, you have a control plane, and the control plane is where you've got the associated metadata for the job design. So where you've got the UI that you're looking at here. And you've also got an orchestration engine with which they call pipelines. And the pipelines allow you to do things like control the flow, and you can make complex connections in a pipeline. So you can do things like if you have companion services like Watson Studio and you're doing Jupyter Notebook development, you're running some Python code and so on, you could say, hey, I want to run this Python notebook, or I want to run this batch script, or I want to do the following, and do that first, then execute a data stage job, wait for that to complete, and then do the following, right? So that's part of the control plane. And then you have data stage itself, and that's doing the work here. So that's the ETL platform that's doing the data integration work. And with that, you can execute in terms of as a service or on-prem. You have an engine. The engine exists within those versions or on IBM Cloud for the as a service. However, you have a version that's a containerized version. It's a lightweight engine that now you can take and you can run elsewhere. So you could, in terms of AWS, you could create an EC2 server. You could run this in Docker and have data stage running that you've defined in your own VPC that's close to the data that you have in AWS, right? And so that allows you to very quickly, very privately control the data not leaving or going anywhere else, even though this is a managed service, controlling the egress and ingress charges that you might have otherwise, and run that job that's close to your data where it is, right? Next to the data. And then talk back to your as a service or your on-prem software version and come back and say, hey, I completed the job, and now continue this complex pipeline. And you can have more than one anywhere engine. So you could even now make decisions, and you could run something in your AWS cloud on some EC2 server and a VPC there, and then run, you also have Azure or you've got GCP, and you can install and run that anywhere engine, and you can decide where you want to run these flows that you've defined in a single UI. So it gives you great flexibility as to where you want to run these jobs and keep it close to the data and keep it private or control the engine in the way you would like to control it, even though this is as a service. So you get kind of the best of both as a service and on-prem software.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, Gabe, based on some of our discussions, this certainly seems to be a hot topic. Um, I think more and more either traditional data stage customers who have been leveraging it for years, and now newer ETL and ELT type customers are really looking at this type of architecture. And I think it really goes to, some of the benefits and the highlights of that. Like having the data closer to the source, ultimately you're reducing like the data travel time, right, across networks. I know you had mentioned it, the egress charges. If you could manage everything within the single cloud, you're able to decrease some of that, the cost associated with that from both the time, but then also a pure dollars standpoint. Um, we also have seen, you have the ability from a compute standpoint to really dynamically scale it up and down to meet different workloads, right? We're in the environment of cloud. So that should be one of the benefits is to scale up, scale down workloads or scale up, scale down based on the workloads. Um, We've seen this help with certain ETL type or SLA type of requirements, performance requirements, and then ultimately optimizing cost, right? If you're able to scale up, scale down based on your requirements, you can dictate some of the costs you're spending from an infrastructure standpoint. Um, Flexibility, right? Everyone's environment's different. It's changing. You have to have the ability to run this type of software where you want it and leverage it to the capabilities that you're looking for. So DataStage allows that. You have multiple different deployment options, and we can certainly work with you to help identify what's the best deployment option for you. One size does not fit all, and we're happy to kind of help architect that for your use case specifically. Um, I think again overall it's all about performance, cost optimization, and leveraging a tool that is built for data integration, right? So as we continue to see DataStage evolve as it goes into more and more use cases, um, we're excited about where it's going and kind of how it's meeting customers with some of the requirements that they need. I guess finally, just to leave it with a little bit of a the value prop there. It's all about performance, flexibility. From when Gabe and I kind of talk with a lot of customers, we do spend a lot of time on kind of like the customer managed versus the vendor managed or tech D managed. Again, every customer has different requirements or different wants as it relates to the software, but with DataStage, you have the options to really do whatever you would like from a deployment standpoint, and then we can help manage that going forward. Um, all about reducing integration costs, not being vendor locked in, and really having the ability to scale different workloads depending on the business requirements. So before I wrap it up, I know we have a couple minutes left. Gabe, would there be any other last minute comments, points that you'd want to mention?
You know, I think some of these I could even show if it helps. I know there are some questions as to dynamic scaling, some of the capabilities that were mentioned here. How difficult is that? That term is used all over the place, but in terms of data stage, data integration product, how does that work? And I could, in Brian, I don't know if that's okay. Is it okay if I actually show something?
Absolutely. We got about 5 minutes.
Okay. So then I sent a request to share, and there we go. Okay. Um, okay. So if you're looking at my screen, right, there are a couple of things that are nuanced in data stage and actually very, very flexible. One is ELT. And for those who aren't familiar, I've mentioned ETL, that stands for extract, transform, load. That was the standard or the typical approach. It's quite flexible if the tool supports a stage or a given set of logic. I can filter, I can aggregate, I can do things like that that you might need to do. The tool can do it. Now, when it does it within the tool. That may not be the fastest way to get things done. So there's a different process, and it's just switching the letters of the acronym itself, and that's ELT, and that's extract, load, transform. A lot of these big systems, Snowflake and so on, support complex logic, and if they're already holding the data in one of these large data platforms, why not let it perform the logic if it can? And DataStage can actually do a lot of ELT transformations. So you can do things like push down the logic for many of these connectors, and it does it for you. So you just decide if you want to do that or not. How much of this do you want to be in an ELT style? If it can do it, it does it, which is great. Now, inside the platform itself, and I'll show you inside the platform, right? So this is what a service looks like this is within Cloud Pak for Data. I'm technically, and there are many different ways you can deploy this. So I could have used a managed service. If you look at this technically is on IBM Cloud. I'm using a managed deployment of OpenShift on IBM Cloud. Technically, this is the software version of Cloud Pak for Data and DataStage within. So with this, you can see I've got a small service that I've defined. Now, this is one way you can scale it out, right? So this is the configuration of the back end of this service. However, you've got flexibility even within where I can go to settings and I can say, hey, for this DSPX default, which is what I called my service instance or this engine, how do I want to define it? And I can define things like workload properties. How many jobs can be running at one time? What's the startup rate? What's the time span to monitor? Things like that. I can do capping of for this given service, where are the CPU and memory utilization caps, meaning you've got to hold things for a little bit while I'm at 95% CPU because I don't want to pin the resources in this containerized environment. But I can even do things like dynamic scaling, right? So this is very cool where I can say, okay, look, this is part of that dynamic scaling. I'm not really going in and defining something. I'm leveraging a containerized environment for what it does best. And so it's going to make a decision and scale this out, right? Which is very cool. Now this is the service itself, and I could define, depending on my environment in the software side, I can define multiple services, and I can actually give them different resources as far as the number of computes and so on. Within a project, so you have sandbox environments within Cloud Pak for Data where you actually perform the work. So as an administrator, I've gone in and done this for my platform. And I might have more than one, but in this case, I'm looking at only one, which is called DSPX default. Now within a project, and here I'm within a project, and you can see some connections I have, but I do have some data stage flows. Now within a project, right, I can have individual projects and I can allow certain developers to go in and do different things in a project. So I can actually use projects to now segregate development environments, resource groups, and so on. But if I go to manage inside a project, not only do I have the ability to control the DSPX default, which you see here, and I can see the default number of computes and CPU and RAM and so on, but I can now inside my project do things like control, okay, here are the number of warnings, right? The priority of the jobs by default, how I want to control things, right? And continue down and actually get very granular in the control I have within the project. If I'm the project administrator, and I can even do things like now say, okay, this project is not only going to be, so I'm running an engine in Cloud Pak for Data that I've defined, or I could say, you know what, this project is going to be tied to a remote engine. And this is now I could make a decision and say, okay, I've got a remote engine. That remote engine is defined inside AWS, Azure, whatever that is. I can click on installation scripts and I can get an installation script to assist me in defining that on a virtualized server somewhere. And then it would register itself back in and I'd be able to attach it to this project and use that instead. Right. So you've got a great deal of flexibility, but I can also do things like tie this to, I can say, okay, from a repository standpoint, what do I want to track? So you can get in here and I can track things like metrics. And you can see I'm using a Postgres database to track metrics. I can do things like enable this with Git integration. So I can now commit jobs. I can pull jobs back. I can do things like that, right? I can travel jobs between environments using GitHub. I can even create test cases, which I can use for things like sampling of. So this would be data sets that I want to use for sampling that could be used for machine learning and so on, and define those here. So quite a bit of flexibility from a scaling standpoint. And I guess I just wanted to, while we had some time, give a demonstration or give a sampling of the flexibility that you have within the platform.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. That's fantastic. And so where do we go from here? As Gavin had indicated at the beginning of the presentation, we plan on having two follow-ups to really dig into the platform, like Gabe kind of shows some of the capabilities a little bit further. So if there's specific questions you'd like us to address in the upcoming webinars, please, feel free to reach out, bring those questions to the table so we can be well prepared. If not, we look forward to, having those conversations one off. Thank you for your time today. And again, look forward to talking.